Abandoned dog appears after 5 years. When baby is drowning and his attitude surprises everyone. On the outskirts of bustling New York City, where the asphalt gradually fades into dirt roads and the city gives way to vast green fields, a lone dog walked with determination. His coat, once lustrous and golden, was now disheveled and covered in dust. His eyes, however, shone with a mixture of hope and longing that contrasted with his worn appearance. This was Buddy, a Labrador who had once been the pride and joy of the Johnson family. 5 years ago, on a day that Buddy remembered with a pang in his canine heart, the family had left him at a gas station on the outskirts of the city. Since then, he had wandered the highways and byways of New York State, facing countless challenges in his tireless quest to find his way back home. Throughout those years, Buddy had survived on what little he could find. He fed on small animals he hunted in the fields and drank from puddles and streams he found along the way. But what really kept him moving, what drove him forward day after day, was the memory of his family and the burning desire to see them again. As he advanced along the dusty road, Buddy remembered the happy moments he had shared with the Johnson family. The laughter of the children, Michael and Sarah, echoed in his memory. He could almost physically feel Mrs. Emily's caresses and hear Mr. Robert's deep, kind voice. These memories were his beacon, his guide in the darkness of loneliness. The sun was beginning to set on the horizon, painting the sky in warm shades of orange and pink. Buddy stopped for a moment, panting from the fatigue of the long day of walking. His paws were sore and his stomach growled with hunger, but he knew he couldn't stop. Something inside him, an instinct he couldn't explain, told him he was close, closer than he had been in years. As he rested under the shade of a tree at the edge of the road, Buddy watched a family pass by in a car. A small child looked at him from the back window, his eyes widening in wonder, and a smile spreading across his face. For a moment, Buddy felt a pang of nostalgia so strong it almost knocked him down. He remembered how he used to travel in the car with the Johnsons, his head out the window, feeling the wind in his fur. But those days were gone. Now his reality was very different. Each day was a struggle for survival, each night a battle against cold and loneliness. However, Buddy refused to give up. The love he felt for his family was stronger than any adversity he had faced on the road. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us which city you're watching from. We continue. As night fell, Buddy entered a small forest near the road. He found a safe place among some bushes and curled up to spend the night. As he closed his eyes, exhausted, his mind wandered to memories of his home. He could clearly see the Johnson house, the white facade with blue details, the garden where he used to play with the children. He could even smell the flowers that Mrs. Emily cultivated with such care. In his dreams, Buddy ran free and happy through that garden, chasing a ball that Michael threw. He could hear Sarah's laughter and feel Mr. Robert's caresses. It was such a vivid dream that for a moment he forgot where he really was. But when dawn came and Buddy opened his eyes, reality hit him once again. He wasn't at home, but in the middle of an unknown forest. However, instead of becoming discouraged, this dream renewed his determination. He got up, shook the leaves and dirt from his fur and continued on his way. As he advanced, Buddy reflected on the challenges he had faced in the last 5 years. He had escaped aggressive stray dogs in the cities, had avoided being run over on busy highways, and had fought against hunger and thirst in the most desolate stretches of his journey. Each obstacle overcome had made him stronger, more resilient. As the sun rose in the sky, Buddy reached a small hill. Upon reaching the top, he stopped short. His heart began to beat hard, and his ears perked up. There, in the distance, he could see the outlines of a familiar city. It wasn't the big New York City, but a smaller town, one he recognized from his early years of life. A howl of joy escaped his throat. After 5 long years, he had finally found his way back. The town where the Johnsons lived was right in front of him. With renewed energy, Buddy began to run downhill, towards the promise of his home. As he ran, memories flooded his mind. He remembered the streets he used to walk with the family, the park where he played with other dogs, even the veterinary clinic where they took him for checkups. Each step he took brought him closer to his goal, to the family he loved so much and had never forgotten. However, as he approached the city limits, a new emotion began to mix with his joy: fear. What if the family no longer lived there? What if they had forgotten him? Would they recognize him after so many years? These questions tormented him, but Buddy pushed them out of his mind. He had come too far to give up now. With renewed determination, Buddy entered the town. The streets were full of people and cars, very different from the lonely roads he had traveled. The noise and movement overwhelmed him for a moment, but he remained focused on his mission. He knew that somewhere in this town was his home, and he wouldn't rest until he found it. As he advanced through familiar but changed streets, Buddy realized how much things had changed in 5 years. New buildings stood where there used to be vacant lots. The stores he remembered had been replaced by others. However, his instinct guided him, leading him through a maze of streets towards his destination. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Buddy turned a corner and his heart skipped a beat. There, at the end of the street, was the house that had occupied his thoughts for 5 long years. The white facade with blue details, the front garden, everything was there, just as he remembered it. With his heart pounding in his chest, Buddy slowly approached the house. Each step filled him with a mixture of emotion and anxiety. After so much time, so much suffering, and so much struggle, he had finally come home. But what would he find on the other side of that door? Buddy stopped in front of the Johnson house, his heart beating hard in his chest. The familiar white facade with blue details stood before him, but something wasn't quite right. The garden, which had once been Mrs. Emily's pride, now looked neglected. The flowers that used to adorn the entrance were withered, and the grass had grown out of control. Cautiously, Buddy approached the front door. His senses, sharpened by years of survival on the streets, caught a familiar scent that filled him with nostalgia. It was the smell of his family, though somewhat diluted by time. However, there was something else in the air, a touch of abandonment and sadness that he didn't remember from his happy days in this house. As he circled the house looking for any sign of life, Buddy noticed that the curtains were drawn and no sound could be heard from inside. The feeling that something wasn't right intensified, but his determination didn't waver. He had come a long way to get here, and he wouldn't give up so easily. Suddenly, something caught his attention in the backyard. There, half buried among the tall grass, he saw an object that made his tail start to move involuntarily. It was his old toy, a worn tennis ball that had been his favorite. With a mixture of excitement and nostalgia, Buddy ran towards the toy and began to dig it out with his paws. As he dug, memories flooded his mind. He could see himself, younger and full of energy, chasing this same ball around the garden while Michael and Sarah laughed and cheered him on. He remembered lazy afternoons lying on the grass, nibbling on his toy while the family enjoyed a barbecue. Each memory was like a ray of sunshine warming his heart after years of cold and loneliness. Finally, he managed to unearth the ball. It was dirty and worn, but to Buddy it was the most valuable treasure in the world. He took it carefully between his teeth, savoring the familiarity of its texture and smell. For a moment he felt as if time hadn't passed, as if he were once again the happy puppy he used to be. But the reality of his current situation soon set in. He was back home, yes, but the house seemed abandoned, and there were no signs of the Johnson family. What had happened in these 5 years? Where was everyone? As Buddy pondered these questions, a sudden sound caught his attention. It came from the direction of the pool, an urgent splashing followed by a choked cry. Without thinking twice, Buddy dropped the ball and ran towards the sound, his protective instinct taking over. Upon reaching the edge of the pool, the scene he found made his heart stop for a second. There in the water, a baby was desperately struggling, trying to stay afloat. The little one couldn't have been more than 2 years old, and it was clear he didn't know how to swim. Without hesitating for an instant, Buddy jumped into the water. Despite the years of hardship that had weakened his body, adrenaline gave him the strength he needed. He swam with all his might towards the baby, remembering the days when he used to play in this same pool with Michael and Sarah. When he reached the baby, Buddy carefully took him by the clothes with his teeth, making sure to keep the little one's head above water. With a Herculean effort, he began to swim back to the edge of the pool. Each stroke was a struggle against exhaustion, but Buddy's protective instinct was stronger than any fatigue. Just as they were reaching the edge of the pool, Buddy heard shouts and hurried footsteps approaching. 2 figures appeared running in the garden, their faces contorted with panic. They were a young man and woman, and for a moment, Buddy didn't recognize them. But then, as he emerged from the water with the baby in tow, reality hit him like a wave. Those eyes, those features, They were Michael and Sarah, the children he used to play with, now grown into adults. Time had passed faster than Buddy could comprehend. Michael lunged towards the pool and took the baby in his arms, hugging him tightly as tears of relief ran down his cheeks. Sarah, for her part, stood paralyzed, her eyes fixed on Buddy. Her expression went from fear to amazement, and then to a mixture of recognition and guilt. "Buddy?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling. "Is that you?" Buddy, soaked and exhausted, sat on his hind legs, looking at those who were once his children. His tail moved slightly, an instinctive gesture of happiness at hearing his name after so long. Michael, still hugging the baby who was now crying softly, turned to Buddy. His eyes widened as he recognized the dog who had been his best friend in childhood. "It can't be," he murmured, his voice a mixture of amazement and remorse. At that moment, Buddy noticed that both siblings were staring at something on his body. Following their gaze, he saw a deep scar on his side, a mark that wasn't there when they abandoned him. It was a physical reminder of the dangers and difficulties he had faced on his long journey back home. The guilt in Michael and Sarah's eyes was palpable. They looked at each other and then back at Buddy as if they were seeing a ghost from the past. The silence that followed was broken only by the soft sobs of the baby and Buddy's panting, still recovering from his heroic rescue. Sarah was the first to move. With trembling steps, she approached Buddy and knelt in front of him. Her eyes were full of tears as she extended a hesitant hand towards the dog. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Buddy." Buddy, despite the years of abandonment and suffering, didn't hesitate. He approached Sarah and rested his head on her hand, allowing her to pet him. The simple gesture unleashed a torrent of emotions in Sarah, who broke down crying, hugging the dog that had once been an integral part of her family. Michael, still holding the baby, joined them. He knelt beside his sister, his own eyes full of tears. "I can't believe you came back," he said, his voice a mixture of amazement and remorse. "After all this time, after what we did." Buddy looked at them both, his brown eyes full of a wisdom and forgiveness that went beyond words. Despite everything that had happened, the love he felt for them had not diminished. His tail moved gently, a sign that despite everything he was happy to be back with his family. The baby in Michael's arms, now calm, extended his small hands towards Buddy, fascinated by the large dog that had saved him. Michael, noticing this, brought the child closer so he could touch Buddy's wet fur. "This is your Uncle Buddy, Alex," Michael said softly. "He saved your life." Sarah, wiping away her tears, looked at her brother. "What are we going to do now, Michael? We can't let him go again." Michael nodded, his face determined. "No, we can't. Buddy is family. He always has been. We made a terrible mistake 5 years ago, but now we have the chance to make it right." As they spoke, Buddy noticed that the house, although neglected, wasn't as abandoned as he had initially thought. There were signs of life, baby toys scattered around the yard, a rocking chair on the porch, clothes hanging on a clothesline. Sarah, noticing Buddy's curious look, began to explain. "A lot has changed, Buddy. Mum and Dad, they're not with us anymore. It was 2 years ago Michael and I inherited the house, but it's been difficult to maintain it like before, especially now that we both have our own families." Michael continued. "I moved back a few months ago with my wife and Alex. Sarah lives in the city but comes on weekends. We've been trying to fix up the house little by little, but..." His voice trailed off, and both siblings looked around, as if seeing for the first time the state of neglect of the place. The guilt on their faces deepened, not only for abandoning Buddy, but also for having neglected the home their parents had loved so much. Buddy, sensing their distress, approached both of them and gently pushed them with his muzzle, as he used to do when they were children and were sad. This simple gesture seemed to break the tension, and both Michael and Sarah couldn't help but smile through their tears. "You're amazing, Buddy," Sarah said, stroking his head. "After everything we did to you, you're still here, comforting us. You've given us a second chance we don't deserve." Michael nodded, his face serious. "And we're not going to waste it. Buddy, I know we can't erase the past, but I promise you that from now on, you'll be part of this family again. We'll never abandon you again." As they spoke, the sun was beginning to set, bathing the garden in a golden light. Buddy, exhausted from the long journey and the emotion of the day, lay down next to his humans. For the first time in 5 years, he truly felt at home. Sarah stood up, determination shining in her eyes. "I'm going to prepare something to eat for everyone. Buddy must be hungry after everything." Michael nodded, standing up with Alex in his arms. "I'm going to find towels and prepare a comfortable place for Buddy to sleep tonight. Tomorrow we'll take him to the vet to check that scar and his general condition." As the siblings moved, Buddy watched them with a mixture of joy and caution. A part of him feared that all of this was a dream, that he would wake up and find himself alone on the streets again. But the familiar smell of the house, the voices of Michael and Sarah, and the soft touch of Alex's hands on his fur assured him that this was real. That night, as the family dined in the kitchen, Buddy ate his first home-cooked meal in years. Michael and Sarah spoke in low voices, making plans for the future, discussing how to integrate Buddy into their lives and how to honor their parents' memory by taking better care of the family home. Buddy listened to all of this from his new bed, a comfortable cushion that Michael had placed in the living room. Although he was exhausted, he fought against sleep, fearing that if he closed his eyes, everything would disappear. But finally, fatigue overtook him. As he sank into a deep sleep, Buddy felt a peace he hadn't known in years. He had found his way back home, and although he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, he was ready to face it. For the first time in a long time, Buddy fell asleep without fear of tomorrow, surrounded by the love of the family he had never stopped yearning for. The first rays of sun filtered through the curtains when Buddy opened his eyes. For a moment, he felt disoriented, the soft cushion under his body a drastic change compared to the hard floors he had become accustomed to. But then the events of the previous day flooded his mind, and his tail began to move with contained joy. He was home. He got up, stretching his legs and feeling every muscle in his body. The years on the street had left their mark, and now that the adrenaline of the reunion had dissipated, Buddy felt the weight of his long journey. However, the excitement of being back with his family outweighed any physical discomfort. He walked silently through the house, his paws making a soft sound on the wooden floor. The house was different from how he remembered it. There was new furniture, the walls had a different color, and the smells had changed. But beneath all these differences, the essence of what he had always considered his home persisted. Upon reaching the kitchen, he found Michael preparing breakfast. The young man, now a man, turned at the sound of Buddy's paws and smiled widely. "Good morning, friend," said Michael, bending down to pat Buddy's head. "How did you sleep?" Buddy responded with a soft bark and wagged his tail more enthusiastically. Michael laughed and served him a bowl of fresh water and another with special dog food he had bought the night before. "Eat well, Buddy," Michael said as the dog approached the bowls. "We have an important day today. We're going to take you to the vet to check that scar and your general condition." As Buddy ate, the rest of the family began to wake up. Sarah, who had stayed overnight, entered the kitchen yawning, followed by a young woman carrying little Alex. Buddy looked at her curiously. "Good morning, everyone," said the woman, smiling. Then she looked at Buddy and her smile widened. "So this is the famous Buddy. I'm Emma, Michael's wife." Buddy approached her, sniffing cautiously. Emma extended a hand and allowed him to smell it before gently petting his head. Alex, in his mother's arms, stirred excitedly at seeing the dog, extending his little hands towards him. "Looks like you already have a new admirer," Sarah laughed, observing the interaction between Buddy and the baby. Breakfast passed in an atmosphere of family warmth that Buddy had deeply missed. He closely observed the interactions between family members, noticing how Michael and Sarah had grown and changed, and how they now behaved as responsible adults. After breakfast, Michael and Sarah prepared to take Buddy to the vet. The dog, although a bit nervous, allowed himself to be put on a new leash that Michael had bought. The car ride was a bittersweet experience for Buddy. On one hand, he enjoyed the familiarity of traveling with his family, but on the other, memories of that last car ride when they abandoned him still weighed on his mind. At the veterinary clinic, Dr. Thompson, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, examined Buddy thoroughly. His expert hands ran over the dog's body, stopping at the scar on his side. "This wound was quite serious," commented the vet, frowning. "It's a miracle it healed so well without medical attention. Buddy is a fighter." Michael and Sarah exchanged guilty looks as Dr. Thompson continued his examination. Finally, after a series of tests, the vet turned to them with a serious expression. "Well, considering everything he's been through, Buddy is in surprisingly good condition," he said. "However, there are some things we need to address. He's malnourished and dehydrated, which is understandable after living on the street. He also has some fleas and needs his vaccines updated." The vet paused before continuing. "But what concerns me most is his emotional state. Buddy shows signs of stress and anxiety, which is normal after what he's been through. He's going to need time, patience, and a lot of love to readjust to family life." Michael nodded solemnly. "We'll do whatever is necessary, Doctor. Buddy is part of our family, and we want the best for him." Sarah added, "Is there anything specific we should do to help him adapt?" Dr. Thompson smiled at their concern. "The most important thing is to establish a routine, regular meals, daily walks, and lots of affection. I also recommend that you give him a quiet space in the house where he can retreat if he feels overwhelmed. And of course, be patient. Readjustment will take time." Armed with medications, advice, and a list of special care instructions, Michael and Sarah took Buddy back home. During the return trip, they discussed how to implement the vet's recommendations and how to reorganize their lives to accommodate Buddy's needs. Upon arriving home, they were greeted by Emma and Alex. The baby shouted with joy at seeing Buddy, who, despite his fatigue, wagged his tail in response. "How did it go?" Emma asked, noticing Michael and Sarah's serious expressions. "Well, in general," Michael replied, "but we have a lot of work ahead of us to help Buddy recover completely." As the family discussed the details of the vet visit, Buddy headed to his cushion in the living room. He felt exhausted, not only physically but also emotionally. The last 2 days had been an emotional roller coaster, and he needed time to process it all. From his place in the living room, Buddy observed the family. He could sense their concern and love, but he also noticed the underlying tension. He instinctively knew that his presence had altered the family dynamics and that everyone was trying to adjust to this new reality. As he fell asleep, Buddy wondered what the coming days would be like. He had found his way back home, yes, but the real challenge was just beginning. Readjusting to family life, building trust, forgiveness, all of that would take time and effort. But as he listened to the soft voices of his family and felt the warmth of the home he had missed so much, Buddy knew one thing for certain. No matter how difficult the road ahead, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. And this time, he was determined to stay. The days that followed were a whirlwind of adjustments and new routines for the Johnson family and for Buddy. Following Dr. Thompson's recommendations, Michael and Sarah strived to establish a daily structure that would help Buddy feel secure and readjust to family life. Each morning began with an early walk. Michael, before going to work, would take Buddy to tour the neighborhood. These morning walks quickly became the favorite time of day for both. Buddy enjoyed exploring the familiar but changed streets, while Michael took the opportunity to catch up with his old friend. "You know, Buddy," Michael said one morning as they walked through the local park, "we never stopped thinking about you. Sarah and I, we regretted what we did every day since we left you. We were young and stupid, and we had no idea how to take care of you when our parents got sick." Buddy looked at him with his brown eyes full of understanding, as if he could understand every word. Michael crouched down to stroke his head, his eyes moist. "But that's no excuse. We failed you, and I'm so sorry. I promise you it will never happen again." At home, Emma took care of Buddy's meals, carefully following the special diet recommended by the vet to help him regain weight and strength. At first, Buddy was anxious during meals, as if he feared it would be the last time he would see food. He ate quickly, almost choking, a habit acquired during his years on the street. "Easy, friend," Emma would say softly, stroking his back as he ate. "There's no rush. No one's going to take your food away." Little by little, with patience and constant affection, Buddy began to relax during meals. He learned that there would always be more food in his bowl, that he didn't need to hoard or eat desperately. Afternoons were usually the most challenging time. When the house filled with activity, with Alex crawling everywhere and the family busy with their chores, Buddy sometimes felt overwhelmed. In those moments, he would retreat to his quiet corner, a cozy space that Sarah had created for him in the study, away from the bustle of the main room. It was during one of these busy afternoons when the first incident occurred that tested the family's determination. Alex, in his childish curiosity, crawled up to Buddy while he was resting on his cushion. Before Emma could stop him, The baby grabbed Buddy's tail, pulling it hard. Buddy, surprised and scared, reacted with a growl and quickly moved away, leaving Alex crying more from surprise than from any real harm. Emma, alarmed, ran to pick up her son, while Michael hurried to calm Buddy. "Are you okay?" Emma asked, checking Alex with concern. "He's fine, just scared," Michael replied, alternating his attention between his son and Buddy. "Buddy didn't hurt him, he just got scared too." The incident, although brief, left everyone shocked. That night, after Alex had fallen asleep, the family gathered to discuss what had happened. "Maybe we should be more careful," Emma suggested, still visibly worried. "Perhaps Buddy needs more time before being close to Alex." Sarah, who had arrived for the weekend, intervened. "Buddy would never intentionally hurt Alex. I remember when we were kids, he was incredibly patient with us." Michael nodded, thoughtful. "That's true, but we also have to remember that Buddy has been through a lot. Doctor Thompson warned us about possible anxiety and stress issues. After a long discussion, they reached an agreement. They would increase supervision when Alex and Buddy were together and work on teaching the baby how to interact gently with the dog. They also decided to seek the help of a canine trainer specialized in rescued dogs to guide them in the process of Buddy's readjustment. As the days passed, Buddy began to show signs of improvement. His coat, once dull and matted, gradually regained its golden shine. He gained weight and strength, and his eyes regained that spark of joy that Michael and Sarah remembered from their childhood. However, not everything was easy. Buddy still had difficult moments. Sometimes a loud noise or a sudden movement would startle him, making him run to hide. Other times he would stare out the window for hours, as if a part of him was still on the streets, looking for the way home. One night, a strong storm hit the town. Thunder rumbled in the sky, making the windows shake. Buddy, terrified, began to run through the house, barking and whimpering. Michael and Emma got up, finding the dog trembling under the dining room table. "Come here, friend," Michael called softly, extending a hand towards Buddy. "You're safe. We're here with you." Little by little, with soft words and gentle caresses, they managed to calm Buddy. That night, against their usual custom, they allowed the dog to sleep in their room. Buddy curled up on the floor next to the bed, finally relaxing with the close presence of his humans. The next morning, as they had breakfast, Michael and Emma discussed the incident from the night before. "I've never seen him so scared," Emma commented, looking at Buddy, who was now sleeping peacefully on his cushion. Michael nodded, thoughtful. "It makes me wonder about everything he must have gone through on the streets. The storms must have been terrifying without a roof over his head." "He's getting better," Emma said with a hopeful smile. "Every day I see a bit more of the Buddy you remember." "Yes," Michael agreed, "but we still have a long way to go." As the family continued with their morning routine, Buddy watched them from his place. He could sense their concern, their love, and their determination. And although the memories of his years on the street still haunted him, each day he felt a little more at home, a little more secure. The road to complete recovery would be long and sometimes difficult, but Buddy was ready to face it. Because now he knew he wasn't alone. He had a family that loved him, a home to belong to, and the strength he had gained on his long journey back. With each passing day, the fear faded a little more, replaced by the hope of a future full of love and security. And so, in the warmth of that family embrace, Buddy closed his eyes and allowed himself to dream, not of dusty roads and cold nights, but of sunny days in the garden, children's laughter, and the unwavering love of his family. The long journey had ended. He was home truly and forever. Time passed, seasons changed, and life in the Johnson house flowed with a harmony that seemed almost magical. Buddy, once a lost and frightened dog, had become the beating heart of the family, a living symbol of loyalty, forgiveness, and unconditional love. It was a sunny spring morning, almost 2 years after Buddy's return, when the family decided to do something special. Michael had an idea he had been secretly planning for weeks, and he was finally ready to share it. "What do you think about taking a trip today?" he proposed during breakfast with a mysterious smile on his face. Emma looked at her husband curiously. "A trip? Where to?" Michael smiled mysteriously. "It's a surprise," he replied, winking at Sarah, who seemed to be in on the plan. "I can only tell you that it's important for Buddy to come with us." Intrigued, everyone prepared for the outing. Buddy, sensing the excitement in the air, circled around the family, his tail wagging non-stop. They got into the car with Alex, now a boy of almost 3, secured in his car seat, and Buddy in his usual place in the back seat next to Sarah. The trip lasted about an hour, during which Emma's curiosity grew exponentially. Finally, Michael took a turn onto a rural road. The landscape began to change, becoming greener and more lush. After a few minutes, the car stopped in front of a large property surrounded by trees. "What is this place?" Emma asked, looking around in amazement. Michael smiled widely. "Welcome to our new home." The surprise on Emma and Alex's faces was evident. Sarah, for her part, smiled knowingly. "New home?" Emma repeated, incredulous. Michael nodded, taking his wife's hand. "I've been thinking about this for months. Our current house is full of memories, but also some shadows from the past. I thought it would be good for all of us to have a fresh start, a place we can fill with new happy memories." They got out of the car and began to explore the property. It was a large house, rustic in style, with a spacious garden and a small pond. There was enough space for Alex to play, for Buddy to run freely, and even a perfect studio for Sarah, who had started working from home. As they toured the place, Buddy ran from one side to the other, sniffing every corner with enthusiasm. He seemed as excited as the rest of the family. "What about our neighbors?" Emma asked, still processing the surprise. Michael smiled even more. "That's the best part. Come, I want to show you something." He guided the family towards a path that led to a neighboring house, not far from theirs. As they approached, they saw an older couple waiting for them on the porch, smiling warmly. "Emma, Alex, I want you to meet Rose and Carl," Michael said. "They are the owners of the local animal shelter." Rose stepped forward, her eyes shining with kindness. "We're so happy that you've decided to move here. Michael told us Buddy's story, and we couldn't be more excited to have you as neighbors." Carl nodded, adding, "We have many dogs and cats in the shelter that need homes. We thought that maybe in time you might be interested in adopting a friend for Buddy." The idea of being able to help more animals in need touched the whole family deeply. Buddy, as if understanding the conversation, approached Rose and Carl, allowing them to pet him confidently. As they watched Buddy interact with their new neighbors, each member of the Johnson family reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them to this moment. Sarah, with tears of joy in her eyes, crouched down to hug Buddy. "All of this is thanks to you, friend. You taught us the true meaning of loyalty and forgiveness. You made us a better family." Michael nodded, joining the hug. "You gave us a second chance, Buddy, and we promise we'll make the most of it." Emma, holding Alex in her arms, joined the family hug. "This is a new beginning for all of us, an opportunity to create a home full of love, not just for us, but maybe for other animals that need a family." Alex, although too young to fully understand what was happening, felt the emotion of the moment. He extended his little arms to pet Buddy, laughing when the dog licked his face affectionately. As the sun began to set, bathing the scene in a golden light, the Johnson family stood there embracing, with Buddy at the center. The dog that had once been abandoned, that had fought against all odds to find his way back home, was now at the heart of a new adventure. This new home represented more than just a change of location. It was a symbol of transformation, of second chances, and of the healing power of unconditional love. Buddy had found his way back not just to a house, but to a family that had learned, thanks to him, the true meaning of loyalty and forgiveness. And so, as the sky turned shades of pink and orange, the Johnson family looked to the future with hope and joy. They knew that, no matter what challenges they might face, they would face them together. With Buddy by their side, they were ready to write the next chapter of their lives, one filled with love, compassion, and the promise of new beginnings. At that moment, under the sunset sky, with the sound of Alex's laughter and Buddy's joyful barks filling the air, the Johnson family knew they had found more than just a new home. They had found their place in the world, a place where the past could heal and the future shone with infinite possibilities. And Buddy, the faithful friend who had traveled a long way to reunite with them, could finally rest, knowing that his journey had ended. He was home, surrounded by love, exactly where he belonged. As the weeks passed, the Johnson family settled into their new home, and Buddy continued to thrive in his role as the family's beloved companion. The spacious property allowed him to run and play to his heart's content, and the peaceful surroundings seemed to have a calming effect on him. One sunny afternoon, Michael decided to start a new project in the backyard. He had been thinking about building a treehouse for Alex, and today seemed like the perfect day to begin. As he gathered his tools and materials, Buddy watched him curiously, tail wagging with excitement. "Want to help, Buddy?" Michael asked, patting the dog's head affectionately. Buddy barked in response, as if to say, "Yes." As Michael worked on the treehouse, Buddy stayed close by, sometimes fetching drop tools or simply providing companionship. Alex, supervised by Emma, played nearby, occasionally coming over to help his dad or pet Buddy. Sarah, who had taken the day off from work, joined them in the backyard. She brought out a pitcher of lemonade and some snacks, setting them on a small table near where Michael was working. "This is nice," she said, looking around at her family. "It's like we're building more than just a treehouse. We're building new memories." Emma nodded in agreement. "It's amazing how different things are now. A few years ago, we could never have imagined this." As they talked, Buddy suddenly perked up his ears and looked towards the edge of the property. A moment later, they heard the sound of a car approaching. "That must be Rose and Carl," Michael said, climbing down from his ladder. "They said they might stop by today." Sure enough, their new neighbors soon appeared, walking down the path that connected their properties. Carl was carrying a large basket, while Rose held what looked like a folder full of papers. "Hello, neighbors!" Rose called out cheerfully as they approached. "We thought we'd drop by and see how you're settling in." The Johnsons welcomed them warmly, and soon everyone was seated comfortably in the backyard, enjoying the lemonade and snacks. Buddy, after greeting Rose and Carl with a friendly wag of his tail, settled down at Michael's feet. "We brought you something," Carl said, placing the basket on the table. "Just a little welcome gift from the shelter." Emma opened the basket to find it filled with toys and treats for Buddy, as well as some homemade cookies for the family. "This is so thoughtful," she said, touched by the gesture. "Thank you both." Rose then opened the folder she had brought. "We also wanted to talk to you about something," she began, her tone becoming more serious. "As you know, our shelter is always in need of help. We were wondering if you might be interested in fostering some animals occasionally." Michael and Emma exchanged glances. They had discussed the possibility of helping at the shelter, but fostering hadn't occurred to them. "What exactly would that involve?" Sarah asked, leaning forward with interest. Carl explained. "Sometimes we get animals that need a little extra care before they can be adopted. Puppies that need to be bottle-fed, dogs recovering from surgery, or just shy animals that need socialization. Foster homes provide a safe, loving environment for these animals until they're ready for their forever homes." As they listened, the Johnsons found themselves growing more and more interested in the idea. Even Buddy seemed to be paying attention, his ears perked up as if he understood the conversation. "We'd need to think about it and discuss it as a family," Michael said carefully. "But I have to admit, it sounds like a wonderful way to help." Rose nodded understandingly. "Of course, take all the time you need. And if you decide it's not for you, there are plenty of other ways to help at the shelter." As Rose and Carl prepared to leave, they paused to give Buddy one last pat. "You know," Carl said, looking at the dog fondly, "Buddy's story has inspired a lot of people at the shelter. It reminds us why we do what we do." After their neighbors left, the Johnson family sat in thoughtful silence for a while. Alex had fallen asleep on the grass, with Buddy lying protectively beside him. "What do you all think about fostering?" Emma finally asked, breaking the silence. Sarah was the first to respond. "I think it's a great idea. We have the space and it would be a wonderful way to give back." Michael nodded slowly. "I agree, and I think it would be good for Alex to learn about caring for animals in need. What do you think, Emma?" Emma looked at Buddy and Alex, a soft smile on her face. I think Buddy has shown us how much love an animal can bring into our lives. If we can help other animals find that kind of love, we should." As if sensing he was being talked about, Buddy raised his head and looked at them, his tail thumping gently against the ground. "Well, Buddy," Michael said, reaching out to scratch behind the dog's ears, "what do you think about having some temporary brothers and sisters?" Buddy's response was an enthusiastic bark and a series of tail wags that set everyone laughing. "I guess that settles it," Sarah said, grinning. "The Johnson family is going into the fostering business." As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the yard, the family began to clean up and head inside. Michael paused at the half-finished treehouse, making a mental note to continue work on it tomorrow. That night, as they all settled in for bed, there was a sense of excitement and purpose in the air. They were not just a family anymore. They were becoming part of something bigger, a network of compassion and care for animals in need. Buddy, curled up on his bed in the corner of Michael and Emma's room, seemed to sense the change too. As he drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled not with memories of his past struggles, but with visions of a future filled with new friends to play with and more love to share. The Johnsons' decision to become foster parents for animals in need marked the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. It was a chapter filled with challenges, joy, and countless moments of love and compassion. And at the center of it all was Buddy, the once abandoned dog who had not only found his way back home but had also helped create a home for many other animals in need. As the years passed, the Johnson house became known in the community as a haven for animals in transition. Dogs, cats, and even the occasional rabbit or guinea pig found temporary refuge with the family, each one leaving paw prints on their hearts before moving on to their forever homes. Buddy, now a distinguished senior dog with a graying muzzle, took on the role of welcoming committee for each new foster animal. He seemed to have a special way of making the newcomers feel at ease, as if he understood their fears and uncertainties. One particularly memorable foster was a young Labrador mix named Lucky. The puppy had been found abandoned on the side of the road, much like Buddy had been years ago. When Lucky arrived at the Johnson home, he was scared and withdrawn, cowering at any sudden movement or loud noise. Buddy, sensing the puppy's fear, approached him slowly, his tail wagging gently. He lay down next to Lucky, not making any demands, just offering his presence as comfort. Over the next few days, the family watched in amazement as Buddy patiently coaxed Lucky out of his shell, teaching him how to play and showing him that humans could be trusted. As Lucky's confidence grew, so did the bond between the two dogs. They became inseparable, playing in the yard, napping together in sunny spots, and even sharing Buddy's bed at night. When the day came for Lucky to go to his forever home, there were mixed emotions all around. "I almost wish we could keep him," Alex, now a teenager, said as they watched Lucky leave with his new family. Sarah, who had become deeply involved in the shelter's work over the years, put her arm around her nephew's shoulders. "I know it's hard to say goodbye, but think about how many more dogs we can help if we keep fostering." Michael nodded in agreement. "And look at Buddy. He seems to understand that this is part of our mission now." Indeed, Buddy was sitting calmly by the door, his eyes following Lucky's departure. There was no sign of distress in his demeanor, just a quiet acceptance and perhaps a hint of pride in a job well done. That evening, as the family gathered in the living room, Emma brought up a subject they had been discussing for a while. "I've been thinking," she began, "maybe it's time we considered adopting another dog permanently. Not to replace Buddy, of course, but to give him a constant companion." The idea was met with enthusiasm, especially from Alex. "Can we go to the shelter tomorrow to look?" he asked excitedly. Michael laughed. "Not so fast, Buddy. We need to think this through carefully. It's a big decision." Sarah, always the voice of reason, added, "We should also consider Buddy's feelings. He's been the only dog in the house for so long." As if on cue, Buddy got up from his bed and walked over to where the family was sitting. He looked at each of them in turn, his brown eyes wise and understanding, before settling down in the middle of their circle. "You know," Michael said thoughtfully, "I think Buddy's been trying to tell us something for a while now. The way he's been with our foster animals, especially Lucky. It's like he wants to share the love and security he's found here." Emma nodded, reaching out to stroke Buddy's fur. "You're right. It's almost as if he's been preparing us for this." The decision was made. The next day, the entire Johnson family, including Buddy, visited the local animal shelter. As they walked through the kennels, Buddy trotted alongside them, occasionally stopping to sniff at a particular dog. Near the end of one row, they came across a kennel housing an older golden retriever. The dog's muzzle was gray, and there was a sadness in her eyes that spoke of a hard life. When she saw Buddy, however, her tail began to wag slowly. Buddy sat down in front of the kennel, looking back at his family as if to say, this is the one we should take home." The shelter worker, seeing their interest, came over with the dog's information. "This is Daisy," she explained. "She was found wandering the streets about a month ago. We think she's around 10 years old. Unfortunately, older dogs are often overlooked by adopters." As they talked with the worker and got to know Daisy, it became clear that she was the perfect addition to their family. Her gentle nature complemented Buddy's, and her need for a loving home in her golden years touched everyone's hearts. The adoption process was completed that day, and Daisy came home with the Johnsons. As they watched Buddy show Daisy around the house and yard, gently guiding her and sharing his favorite spots, the family knew they had made the right decision. That night, as everyone prepared for bed, they found Buddy and Daisy curled up together on Buddy's bed, peacefully asleep. The sight brought smiles to everyone's faces and a few happy tears to Emma's eyes. "You know," Michael said softly, not wanting to wake the dogs, "when we left Buddy at that gas station all those years ago, I never could have imagined we'd end up here. He's taught us so much about love, forgiveness, and second chances." Sarah nodded, her voice thick with emotion. "He didn't just find his way back home. He showed us what home really means." As they turned out the lights and headed to their own beds, the Johnson family felt a sense of completeness. Their journey with Buddy had been one of redemption, growth, and unconditional love. And now, with Daisy joining their family, they were ready for the next chapter in their adventure. Buddy, in his dreams, revisited the long road that had brought him back to his family. But now those memories were no longer tinged with fear or loneliness. Instead, they were a reminder of the strength he had found within himself, the love he had never stopped believing in, and the family that had been waiting for him all along. In the quiet of the night, two dogs slept peacefully, surrounded by the love of a family that had learned the true meaning of home. And in homes across the town, other dogs and cats, once lost or abandoned, now slept just as peacefully, thanks to the ripple effect of one dog's incredible journey back home.